20,000 US adults found that people who limited their eating across 8 hours per day were more likely to die from cardiovascular disease compared to people who ate within 12 to 16 hours per day. I'm going to touch on, I don't even know if I want to call it a study. It was more like a press release from the American Heart Association regarding a study that was done between the period of time from 2003 to 2018. And if you haven't seen it already, the title is 8-Hour Time-Restricted Eating Linked to a 91% Higher Risk of Cardiovascular Death. Now, I went back and forth about actually doing a video on this because bringing more attention to this, because the press just jumped all over this. I'm assuming like the American Heart Association, and I could be wrong on this, but I'm assuming that they like send it out to all the press to, and maybe even, I don't even know, there's probably even money being exchanged there. This could be like the main sort of topic that gets sent out on Forbes, on all these different media outlets. And so if you haven't seen it, I'll just share my screen with you real quick. And there it is, 8-Hour Time-Restricted Eating Linked to a 91% Higher Risk of Cardiovascular Death. American Heart Association Epidemiology and Prevention. There was this conference that was in Chicago where this was presented. There you are, Chicago, March 2024. 20,000 US adults found that people who limited their eating across 8 hours per day were more likely to die from cardiovascular disease compared to people who ate within 12 to 16 hours per day, according to preliminary research. So not a true study. This is epidemiology. This is not a randomized controlled study. And this was more like data collection. It simply was a 24-hour dietary recall a couple of times. So like a food questionnaire. So lots of shortcomings. And thank God in this press release at the bottom here, you know, if you're willing to scroll more than the title, which most people aren't, the study's limitations included its self-reliance on self-reported dietary information, which may be affected by participants' memory or recall, and may not accurately assess typical eating patterns. So they're asking individuals to recall 2 days of their eating throughout this period between 2003 and 2018. First of all, people weren't even fasting, or that wasn't even like a term back in 2003. Also, here are factors that may also play a role in health outside of just the eating time were not included in the analysis. So this person could be out late drinking and be stressed beyond belief, but that wasn't part of the study. It was simply just when they ate. So just a lot of limitations in this study. It's sort of sad that the media has to run with this. I think that there's so many great randomized controlled studies that should be highlighted from the media as opposed to this. Now, the interesting thing is, and I just did a little bit of a deep dive into, you know, where does the American Heart Association get their money from, right? Well, I can even share my screen just to show you this real quick. So about 42 million cash received during 2022, 2023 from pharmaceutical and biotech companies and device manufacturers. You know, you always got to just understand like who is providing funding to these organizations. So you got to take this stuff with a grain of salt. I mean, you know, it is sad, but this is the time we live in, right? Money rules. You just got to follow the dollar. And the fact that the American Heart Association comes out with this like headline that sounds like, gosh, if you eat within an 8-hour window, you're going to drop dead from a heart attack is just absolutely, I think what it does is it actually takes credibility away from them. Doesn't? I mean, anyone in their right mind who's been around the health business for long enough and been in this game understands that this is just sort of an overprojection on really much a survey that was done between a period of time. So, you know, I'm sure as avid health listeners like yourself, this was not something that you took that seriously. I got a bunch of messages around it, and I just wanted to clear the air. And this is my thought on it. You might have a different take, but yeah, if I was going to tell you anything about fasting, I'd say this. My tone on fasting has changed through the years. I think it can be overdone, and especially if you're underweight, very active, and lean. I don't think you really need to fast. A lot of times those individuals undereat. They don't eat enough food, and they don't get enough protein in for the amount of activity that they're doing. That's sort of what I found out for me, and I actually added in a meal. So I will say that you can be overdone. It's not like the Holy Grail, but it's just a tool. And I would just say if you're curious about doing some type of fasting, I would just say is my best advice would be to cut off your eating time in the evening. I've talked about this before in the past, but you know, you have your circadian rhythm and you also have obviously your sleep quality. And in order to increase sleep quality, I think one of the main things you can do is not eat too close to bed. So my advice would be that instead of worrying about questionnaire survey like this is I would say cut off your eating time and give yourself about 3 to 4 hours to digest your food. That'll increase your sleep quality and help you get your blood sugar back to, a normal level after your postprandial blood sugar levels back to a normal level before you go to bed. And I think this is a great place to start, something that I've always done for myself and my clients. So typically I go to bed around 10:30. My eating window sort of cuts off around 7 p.m. Now, don't get me wrong. If you have a party or you have a nice occasion, then you eat later, not the end of the world. But 80% of the time, if you can cut your eating window off and give yourself 3 to 4 hours to digest and maybe even go for a walk, which I talked about in my last video, that would be a great place to start. So that's really what I want to touch on today. Just got to be careful about the media and these sources and these studies that come out that just want to grab headlines and grab your attention, and there's nothing really to back it. So yeah. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, brian@briangrin.com. If you want my step-by-step blueprint on how to get your body back to what it once was 10 to 15 years ago without rearranging your life, click the first link below. If you enjoyed this content, YouTube thinks you'll like this next video.